A brittle winter lay over London the way sorrow settles over a heart, quietly, insistently, until the city seemed carved from frost and memory. Carriages rumbled along the icy streets outside Devonshire House, their wheels cracking over cobblestones glazed in pale light, while breath from the horses rose like steam into the night air. Within the grand estate, chandeliers glowed with such brilliance that even the longest shadows dared not linger. Gowns whispered across polished floors, violins trembled in the corners, and the steady hum of aristocratic conversation swelled beneath the gilded ceilings. To any casual observer, it was simply another winter ball, an evening of charitable intention wrapped in luxury, but beneath the glittering surface pulsed all the vanity, ambition, and cruelty of a society forever eager to whisper another person's downfall. Lady Evelyn Grant stepped through the entrance with the measured composure of a woman who had spent 3 years teaching her heart to remain still. At 22, she carried the faint translucence of someone who had lived more in silence than in celebration. Her family, once held in gentle regard despite their limited means, had fallen into near obscurity after the scandal that tore through her life like a winter storm. Even now, as she moved toward the ballroom with her shoulders drawn in a manner both ladylike and defensive, she felt the ghost of old humiliation encircle her. She had returned to London only in obedience to her mother's trembling wish that society might have forgotten the whispers of that dreadful night. Evelyn doubted it, yet she had come nonetheless, wearing a modest gown the color of snowfall, hoping the evening might pass without her name becoming a topic of fascination. But as she entered the ballroom, the warm brilliance of chandeliers greeted her like a world she no longer belonged to. The scent of roses and beeswax hung heavily in the air, and the violins shifted into a lilting melody that felt strangely familiar. Conversations rippled around her, murmured greetings, practiced laughter, but beneath them all Evelyn heard an older sound, the memory of her name spoken with pity, the echo of snickered accusations, the cruel certainty that she had been ruined. 3 winters ago she had been innocent, hopeful, and untested by the world. Now she was something else entirely. Steady, cautious, and shaped by a sorrow she rarely acknowledged aloud. Across the ballroom, the Duchess of Devonshire greeted guests with her usual effervescence, her bright fan opening and closing with elegant rhythm. Evelyn offered a curtsy when the Duchess noticed her return, receiving a cordial nod in return. It was not unkind, but neither was it warm. That, Evelyn thought, was the tone most of London reserved for her now, cordial enough to be polite, cool enough to keep a comfortable distance. Her mother guided her toward the crowd, whispering reminders to smile, to appear grateful for the attention, to accept that tonight was an opportunity to reclaim some sliver of respectability. Evelyn nodded gently, though her gaze drifted often toward the windows where snow pressed softly against the glass panes. She wished, not for the first time, that she could slip out into the night and walk until the cold numbed everything she felt. But she remained, because duty, like winter, was not so easily resisted. While she endured polite conversation with 2 elderly matrons discussing charitable donations, a subtle shift stirred the air. It was faint at first, like a tremor running down the ballroom spine, but Evelyn sensed it immediately. A whisper scattered through the guests nearest the entrance. A woman gasped softly. A gentleman straightened his cravat with sudden urgency. The murmurs swelled, folding over one another in a rapid, breathless wave. Without hearing a single name, Evelyn felt her pulse quicken in quiet dread. Only one man could cause such an immediate change in atmosphere. The Duke of Hawthorne had arrived. Alastair Hawthorne entered the ballroom with the cold authority of a man accustomed to command. His dark coat cut a striking figure against the golden light, and the steel of his posture told every observer that his presence was not for pleasure but for obligation. At 26, he wore the weight of his title with an ennui that seemed carved into him, as though responsibility had taken something essential from him and left a hollow in its place. His face, handsome in its brooding austerity, remained unreadable, but his eyes, sharp and unyielding, missed nothing. He had not expected to attend another ball that winter, least of all one in which every noble family of London was assembled. Yet his father's political allies had insisted he pay public respect to the royal patrons sponsoring the charity. So he had come, telling himself it was a duty he could fulfill without incident. What he did not tell himself, what he never admitted even in private reflection, was that he still felt the old ache of regret each time he crossed the threshold of a ballroom. Somewhere in these glittering halls, Evelyn had once looked at him with innocent trust, and he had been the one to extinguish it. He stepped farther inside, offering a stiff bow to the Duchess before his gaze swept the room with detached politeness. He expected to feel nothing. He expected to see nothing that would touch him. Yet when his eyes fixed upon the pale figure near the center of the ballroom, his composure faltered with a subtle, almost imperceptible breath. Evelyn Grant was here. The sensation struck him like a cold wind, unbalancing his certainty. For a moment, the room seemed to narrow, every sparkle of candlelight sharpening into a single point of focus. The woman he had once nearly claimed and then, under pressure and cowardice, abandoned to ruin. She stood still, her posture dignified despite a visible tension in her hands. Time had refined her features. Sorrow had deepened her gaze. She looked older, not in years, but in grief. And then he saw it. Around her neck, glinting like captured winter sunlight, rested a sapphire necklace he knew better than anything he owned. His mother's necklace. The one she had worn every winter until her death. The one she had told him, between coughs and fading breaths, was meant only for the woman he would someday marry. His mother's necklace, shimmering upon Evelyn's throat. For a heartbeat he forgot how to breathe. The ballroom, alive with music and warmth, seemed to freeze around him. He could not think, could not reason, could not understand how the necklace he had locked away after his mother's passing now adorned the very woman he had forced himself to forget. A whisper curled along the walls. Then another. And another. The scandal that had slept for 3 winters stirred awake. And as he took a slow, deliberate step toward her, neither of them knew that this night, this moment, would unravel everything they thought they understood about the past they shared. The music faltered as the Duke crossed the ballroom, though the musicians continued playing out of sheer discipline. Conversations thinned, fans stilled, and countless eyes tracked the slow, inevitable path he cut through the glittering crowd. Evelyn felt the shift before she saw him. A tension, like the charged stillness before a storm breaks, rippled across her skin. When she finally raised her gaze, their eyes met with the force of 3 years' worth of unresolved silence. The sight of him, tall, composed, sculpted by winter light, sent a jolt through her chest. Her breath caught, not out of longing, but out of the memory of every moment she had spent trying to forget him. He stopped a few paces away, bowing with the controlled courtesy expected of a duke. "Lady Evelyn." His voice was low, measured, and entirely devoid of the warmth she once imagined it held. Yet something in his expression, not quite shock, not quite accusation, betrayed the slightest fracture in his composure. "My lord," she replied, offering a curtsy that trembled only in the smallest way. Her mother watched anxiously from a distance, as though fearing the mere presence of the Duke could unravel the fragile threads holding Evelyn's reputation together. He glanced at the necklace with a sharpness that made her instinctively lift her hand toward it, as if shielding it from him. "May I ask," he murmured softly, "how you came into possession of that piece?" Her fingers hesitated against the cool sapphire. "It was a gift," she said, choosing each word with careful precision. "From a benefactor who wished to see me properly attired for the evening." She did not add that the necklace had been delivered anonymously that afternoon, wrapped in velvet, with no note attached. Nor did she mention the moment she opened the box and nearly dropped it in disbelief, recognizing the heirloom she had once seen around the Duchess of Hawthorne's elegant neck. Alistair's jaw tightened as if warring with a dozen unspoken questions. "A benefactor," he repeated, tone deliberately even. "And you accepted it without inquiry?" Evelyn straightened, the soft fabric of her gown shimmering under the chandelier. "I accepted it because refusing such generosity would have seemed ungrateful. I had no reason to assume its origin was improper." "Improper?" His gaze darkened. "That necklace was my mother's. It has been locked away for years. It should not, cannot, have left my possession." Her breath stilled. "Then someone must have taken it from you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And placed it upon you." There was no accusation in the words, but there was something else. Fear, perhaps, or the sting of betrayal. To what end, I wonder? The whisper of scandal swelled around them. Guests pretended indifference, but their ears angled shamelessly toward the conversation. Evelyn felt the weight of every stare pressing upon her. Her heart fluttered in fragile defiance. She would not let humiliation claim her again. "I did not orchestrate this," she said quietly. "I have nothing to gain from reviving a story best left buried." His expression shifted, an almost imperceptible softening, as though he believed her yet did not know what to do with the relief that followed. "No," he murmured. "You never were one to scheme." The admission stung more than it soothed. "I was not one to be defended either." A shadow crossed his features. Before he could respond, the Duchess of Devonshire appeared beside them with impeccable timing, her fan fluttering in a rhythm that suggested both welcome and warning. "Your Grace, Lady Evelyn," she said with a poised smile, "I trust you are enjoying the evening?" Evelyn offered a polite nod, but the Duchess's attention was fixed upon the necklace. Her eyes widened a fraction, though her tone remained perfectly civil. "My, what a striking piece! I have not seen its like in years." The Duke's voice was low. "No one has. It belonged to my mother." A beat of silence passed, short, but heavy enough to shift the air. The Duchess's gaze darted between them before she recovered her gracious poise. "How sentimental, then, that it finds itself worn at such a worthy event." She stepped back, offering them both a practiced smile. "Do continue." Her departure left a hollow quiet between them, filled only by the trembling notes of the orchestra. Evelyn exhaled slowly, willing herself to remain steady. "You must believe me," she said, her voice barely audible. "I never sought your mother's heirloom. I never wished to be entangled with your family again." "That was never your fault," he replied, surprising her. "The fault was mine." The admission stunned her, though his gaze remained fixed upon the necklace. 3 years, he murmured. "And still I find myself incapable of forgetting." Her heart twisted painfully. "You forget quite easily, Your Grace. You simply choose not to remember the parts that cost you nothing." He looked at her then, fully, intensely, as though seeing her not as a ghost from his past, but as a woman who had survived the wreckage he left behind. Emotion flickered within his eyes, followed by a restraint that had hardened into habit. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I did what I believed necessary." "Yes," she whispered, "and I paid the price for it." The orchestra shifted into a slower melody, and couples drifted onto the floor in a graceful tide of silk and shadow. Alastair stepped closer with unguarded urgency. "Let me help you discover who sent the necklace." She hesitated. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. "And if the intention was to humiliate me? To tether me once more to a scandal neither of us can withstand?" His voice deepened. "Then I will see it stopped." A part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the warmth in his tone, the sincerity he had once withheld. But another part, older and forged by sorrow, reminded her of the cold garden where everything ended. "We shall see," she said finally. He inclined his head. "Then let us begin with the simplest question." His gaze brushed the sapphire once more. "Who would wish to bind our names together again?" Before she could answer, a ripple of alarm moved through the ballroom. A footman hurried toward the Duchess with a folded note, his expression pale. Guests whispered. Fans stilled. Music faltered. The Duchess unfolded the note, read it, and lifted her gaze with a startled breath. Her eyes landed on Evelyn, then on the Duke, and the entire room bristled with anticipation. A hush rippled across the ballroom as though someone had drawn a single, sharp breath, and the entire assembly followed. The Duchess of Devonshire lowered the note slowly, her features arranged in that delicate balance between alarm and aristocratic control. Yet the tremor in her gloved hand betrayed her. She signaled discreetly to the Duke and to Evelyn, her fan snapping once in an uncharacteristically brisk motion. Alastair reached Evelyn's side instantly, his presence a sudden shield between her and the sea of watching eyes. "We should go to her," he murmured, though the tension in his voice suggested he already feared what the Duchess might say. Evelyn's heart beat in uneven rhythms. As they crossed the ballroom, the weight of the sapphire necklace seemed to grow heavier with every step, as though aware of the attention now converging upon it, and upon her. Guests parted reluctantly, their whispered speculation rising like the flutter of wings in a confined space. When they reached the Duchess, she folded the note closed but kept her fingers tightly around it. "Your Grace," she said to Alastair. "This was delivered moments ago by a messenger who has already vanished. It is addressed to you, yet concerns Lady Evelyn." He took the note with a frown, his expression sharpening as he unfolded it. Evelyn watched his eyes move across the page, each line tightening his grip until the paper crumpled slightly between his fingers. When he finally looked up, a shadow deeper than anger moved through him. He passed the note to her with a solemnity that made her skin chill. "Read it," he said quietly. "You have every right." Evelyn's gaze dropped to the words written in precise, elegant script. "A necklace for the fallen lady, to remind London of her worth in sapphires rather than virtue. Perhaps this time the Duke will not hide behind duty. No signature, no seal. Only venom carefully wrapped in civility." Her breath shuddered as the meaning settled over her like frost. Her hand trembled, and she looked at Alastair with a mixture of humiliation and dawning dread. "Someone seeks to ruin me again," she whispered. "Or to ruin us both." His expression darkened with a protective fury she had never witnessed from him, not even in the days when he had claimed to care for her. "This is beyond mischief," he said. "It is calculated cruelty." The Duchess inclined her head gravely. "The handwriting is unfamiliar, but the message is unmistakable. Someone from within the ton wishes to resurrect your past scandal and perhaps craft a new one." Evelyn forced a breath into her lungs, though every inhale felt tight. "Why now?" "After 3 years of silence," Alastair answered before the Duchess could speak. "Because you returned. Because you walked into this ballroom stronger, poised, unwilling to bow to their whispers." His eyes softened briefly. "And because you wore that necklace, though through no fault of your own." That moment of gentleness cleared a space in her chest she had not allowed him to enter in years. "Strength," she said quietly, "does not make me invincible." "Nor should it," he replied. "You have borne enough alone." The Duchess's gaze moved between them, her expression thoughtful. "You must consider who stands to gain from tarnishing your presence tonight. Who resented you in the past? Who might fear the Duke's attachment rekindling?" Evelyn opened her mouth to reply, but Alastair spoke first. "There were many who resented her," he said, his tone hollow with regret. "And many who resented me for defending her too little or too late." Evelyn flinched, though she tried to hide it. The Duchess looked at her with a gentleness that seemed unusual for such an intimidating figure. "My dear, do you suspect anyone in particular?" Evelyn hesitated, weighing each memory she had forced herself not to revisit. The whispers in the garden, the accusations, the cold stares. Then one name, one expression, rose from the shadows of her recollection. "Lady Katharina Ashby," she said quietly. "She despised me for the attention I received. She believed she had a claim to the Duke's favor." Alastair's eyes narrowed. "Katharina is cunning, but even she would not dare involve my mother's necklace." "Ambition makes fools of us all," the Duchess murmured. Before more could be said, a sudden swell of voices turned their attention toward the grand staircase. Lady Katharina herself appeared at the landing, dressed in shimmering gold, her smile too bright for the somber music now drifting through the hall. She descended slowly, her gaze sweeping the ballroom like a monarch surveying her court. When her eyes landed on Evelyn, there was the faintest flicker of triumph. Evelyn felt the temperature drop within her. Every part of her wished to retreat, yet she forced herself to stand firm. Alastair stepped closer, a subtle gesture, but one that shielded her from the growing scrutiny. "Stay with me," he said softly. When Katharina reached the floor, she approached with a smile of exaggerated sweetness. "Your Grace," she said, offering Alastair an elegant curtsy. "Lady Evelyn, what a pleasure." The Duchess's expression turned mercilessly polite. "Lady Katharina," she greeted. "We were just discussing an unfortunate message." Katharina placed a hand over her heart in feigned concern. "A message? How dreadful! I do hope it was nothing scandalous." Evelyn held the note at her side, resisting the urge to crush it in her palm. "You seem unsurprised," she said quietly. Katharina blinked, all innocence. "Surprised? Why should I be? Unless... Her gaze dropped to the necklace. Ah, I see an heirloom has resurfaced. How remarkable. Alistair's voice cut through the tension. Katharina, where did you last see this necklace? She tilted her head thoughtfully. Years ago, I believe. Before your mother passed. Why do you ask? Because it was stolen, he said, and delivered anonymously to Lady Evelyn. A flicker, small but unmistakable, crossed her expression. Something between satisfaction and apprehension. Yet she masked it quickly. How curious, she said smoothly. Though I am certain Lady Evelyn attracts many admirers. The Duchess stepped forward with authority. Enough. I will not see this night turned into a circus of insinuations. Lady Katharina, you may take your leave. Katharina's smile thinned, but she curtsied and withdrew. As she moved away, Evelyn exhaled shakily. She is involved, she murmured. Even if not alone. Alistair turned to her. His voice lowered but earnest. Evelyn, hear me. I will not allow anyone to destroy you again. His words fell with the weight of a vow, one he seemed almost afraid to make. She met his gaze, feeling the years of hurt and longing converge into a fragile, trembling truth. Then do not leave me to face this alone, she whispered. He took her hand, not boldly, but with reverence. Never again, he said. And for the first time in 3 winters, she believed him.